Thank you all for being with us this morning. We love welcoming our community back to the center. We're now open 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. with a dedicated staff ready to support. Feels good. This week is Trans Awareness Week, so it is especially wonderful to help support our state take the steps necessary to affirm the LGBTQ community during this time, particularly transgender, gender expansive, and non-binary New Yorkers. It's a pleasure to be joined for this event by some longtime colleagues and fellow community advocates, including Assemblymember Deborah Glick, our Assembly member. Thank you. City Council Member Jimmy Van Bramer. Council Member-elect Tiffany, nope, I'm skipping. Council Member-elect Eric Botcher. Where are you, Eric? There you are. Council Member-elect Chi Osei. Council Member-elect Tiffany Caban. And Council Member-elect Lynn Schulman. As well as Melissa Scalars, T.S. Candy, woo! From the Black Trans Nation, Sean Coleman from Destination Tomorrow, and Tanya Walker. Where's Tanya? I don't see Tanya, but we all love her. She's from Equality New York. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to all the advocates who helped get these bills across the finish line. The Center is committed to advocating for the advancement of legislation and policies in New York that support community needs. The bills that the governor will sign into law today will help ensure that businesses and municipalities respect gender identities and also help to decriminalize and destigmatize survivors of human trafficking. Thank you, Governor Hochul, for helping to champion these efforts. We look forward to building on these victories to make further progress for all LGBTQ people in New York alongside the governor and our state legislatures, and with the support of the LGBTQ and allied organizations that make up this great community a number of us are part of, as well as the statewide advocacy initiative, Rise Out, as well as thousands of individual community members and advocates across New York State. And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to be able to introduce our Governor, Kathy Hochul. There is a lot that I could say about Governor Hochul and her support of the LGBT community. I will just say in brief, this is not the first time the governor has been to the center. We've all seen her many times at these events in and around the center, in and around the city and the state. And so it is truly my honor to be able to welcome for the first time, Governor Kathy Hochul. Congratulations.
You all got so quiet. This is a celebration, need I remind you. We know how to celebrate here in New York. First of all, happy Transgender Awareness Week. Let's get that out there. To celebrate everyone and to know that this is the epicenter of all causes great and good. Everything worth fighting for starts in the state of New York, and we're going to continue the journey, never rest on our laurels, but I believe that I know this is a huge point of pride for all of us, that New York City, Stonewall, is truly known globally as the epicenter of the LGBTQ movement, and that is something I personally am very proud of as well. Glenda, I have been here many times, and I walk through the doors here, and I just feel this sense of people's belonging. People feel that this is a place they can be respected and valued, feelings that they may not have when they're sometimes in their homes or in their schools and their place of work. And that pains me as the leader of this state, but to know that there's an oasis they can come to feel those values that all of us crave, respect and dignity. I thank you for your leadership here. I know it was a tough time through this pandemic, but you never gave up. And you continued fighting for the members of this community, and I know they appreciate it, as do I. So, Glenda Testone, thank you for being the executive director here. I do want to acknowledge some of the amazing elected officials we have here and to thank them for also never giving up the fight. And sometimes it feels the headwinds are against you and you just feel like, how long is this going to take? Some of these ideas have been percolating for such a long time. I think about the fight for gender. Why would that have taken literally a decade or more? Brad Hoylman, you lived and breathed this. I know Deborah Glick was there fighting the good fight. You just never, ever gave up, and so many other people that came forward. I want to thank them, Senator Hoylman, Assemblymember Dick Gottfried, a great fighter who's one of the sponsors of the bill today, Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, Assemblymember Jessica Ramos, our state senator, Deborah Glick, whose district we're in. Thank you very much. Also, I so look forward to working with all the council members elects who are here, as well as our Jimmy Van Bramer is here as well. All of you are going to create a very dynamic city council. I want to tell you, I am so excited about the fact that it is the most diverse city council in the history of the city. There are finally more women as well. I was part of an effort to see if we could go from having 11 women in the city council to possibly even 21. How audacious was that? And we now have 31. So I think this is going to be a whole new era of leadership. And I look forward to working with the new mayor. And I will repeat this again because it is a headline worth repeating, that the era of conflict is over, that a new era of collaboration has begun. The second I have a chance to welcome new Mayor Eric Adams into his position to work with the City Council, that is my pledge to all of you. The fighting between Albany and New York will stop, and instead we'll be starting to fight for the people of the state of New York. It's that simple. Alyssa Crespo, also the Executive Director of the New Pride Agenda, I want to thank you for your leadership. We have a number of bills to talk about here today, and I'm really excited. And I do want to talk about the leaders as well. I will look like a real hero when I pick up a pen in my hand and say, I'm going to sign this. That's the easy part of the job. The hard part is coming up with the idea, seeing an injustice that needs to be rectified, feeling so passionately about it that you're going to take an idea, convert it into a piece of legislation, build support for it, have hearings, get it through the Assembly, get it to the Senate, and get it over the finish line. I don't take for granted how much work is involved with that. And so that brings us here today to talk about two very special bills, but also just why we need these bills in the first place. That's what we need to get to. You look at why are we still talking about these injustices? And there are leaders of the LGBTQ community who, in addition to our elected leaders, people from the community, who have always been fighting these fights, people that care so passionately that whatever they've had to deal with their own life, they won't just internalize that and deal with it themselves. They'll say, I know there's a problem out there and I want to help solve it for others. Activists like Lorena Borjas, a transgender immigrant activist we recently lost to COVID at the age of 59, someone who had made a profound difference at the front of so many transgender battles in Queens and throughout New York. And she started a mission to protect sex workers living with AIDS. She helped start a home for transgender women in her apartment. So many people like her, and think about Cecilia Gentili. I want to thank you for all your work that you've done. The kind of person who says you get into trouble at 3 a.m, you need a doctor, need a lawyer, need housing, you call me and I'll be there for you. I love that sense of commitment to others, and I want to thank to continue the legacy of individuals like these, to continue fighting for our transgender community. Trans New Yorkers should not have any fear in their hearts, but that is not the world we live in today. The violence, the discrimination, the pain caused to these individuals for simply being who they are or walking down the street. And yes, we have eradicated some of the challenges, the walking while trans ban. You now can walk while trans. How about that? But the fact that we had to overcome hurdles to say you can walk while trans in the state of New York is a little bit maddening, but we got it done. Thank you, Brad Hoylman and others who fought for this. But there's still challenges. And we've been at the forefront of many of the victories. It's been a long, long journey, but also where are we here today? What are we talking about today? We're here talking about an issue simply, that should be in the what I would call a no-brainer category, but it's not, so we're going to change this. The first bill gives utility customers the right to be addressed and acknowledged by their chosen names and by the correct pronouns. Now, that should not be a radical statement, but apparently it is, that we have to actually pass a law to change that. With more than 800,000 New Yorkers LGBTQ and 80,000 who are transgender, this is what we just call common sense legislation that is long overdue. And so only 30% of transgender individuals, they actually changed their name because the process is so excruciating. I knew this back when I was a county clerk. What is a county clerk? I was in charge of the legal records and records for real estate way back in my past life a long time ago. I was simply asked by my friends in the LGBTQ community, can we have the ability to identify as we choose? I said yes. Why not? What is the challenge here? This has not been the case statewide for our utilities and others. I want to make sure that they know that these individuals have these rights. So start and reduce the barriers. No longer we need a court order to change your name. There's just too many obstacles. And for a transgender individual being misgendered, it's traumatic. It's truly dramatic. It's stressful. To be dead named, these are people with feelings and individuals who just deserve more than that. And to know that this is going on and causing them anguish, therefore it causes me anguish. This is how I feel so deeply and passionately about the people of this state. So this legislation is necessary to streamline the process for utility corporations to respect a customer's gender identities. It'll also prevent the risk of individuals being found by an abusive family member or partner and reduce the risk of harassment in housing. So this is really important. I want to thank our leaders on this bill. I want to thank Senator Hoyman and Member of Assembly Jessica Gonzalez Rojas for having the vision to see a problem, knowing how to correct it, and that's why we're here today. Let's give them both a round of applause. Another bill that needs to be addressed is known as the START Act, and our sponsors are Member of Assembly Richard Gottfried. You have a lot of my pens these days. I was going to tell you, you've been a lot of your, and Senator Jessica Ramos. And this is the Survivors of Trafficking Attaining Relief Together. It stands for START. And this builds on who I mentioned earlier, Lorena Borjas' legacy, by strengthening the protections for victims of sex trafficking, labor trafficking, compelling prostitution, and trafficking in persons who are convicted of a range of offenses as a result of that trafficking. It allows judges to clear convictions of all offenses resulting from being trafficked, making the bill more equitable and accessible for survivors. Again, these are the victims. These are the people who are trafficked. There is a sadly robust industry out there where people have no choice. They're subjugated into this role as a matter of survival, either personal survival or economic survival. Therefore, they are victims and they need to be protected. The START Act enables judges to examine the facts related to their individual's victimization and make an individual decision as to eligibility. It also codifies that the relief is based on the merits rather than rehabilitation, acknowledging the person never should have been convicted in the first place. Also provides increased protection for immigrant survivors who are far more vulnerable to trafficking. You think about what happens when the traffickers bring individuals places like Buffalo, where I was born, the trafficking coming in from Toronto, Chinese women, you're told you can either work in 5 years at a nail salon to pay your passage or 1 year in sex trafficking. What kind of choice for that is for any human being? What kind of choice? That is going on in our state today and all over this country. So we ensure that the court documents filed by survivors are confidential to protect their safety and dignity. It eases the criminal record for relief process, which can be traumatizing. And this is a critical step forward for individuals who've been subjected to this, who are victimized, for them to have a record that allows them to reemerge into society, get a job without having a record, getting housing, getting education without this stigma, without this record following them. This is just a recognition of people who have been victimized. So these are just two of the bills that we're working on. I also believe there's so much more we can do. I have been to supportive housing for senior members of the LGBTQ community. When I walk in those rooms and I see that there's this sense of relief, that especially older members of the community who don't have children and grandchildren who are going to be checking in on them and looking out for them. People like my Uncle Kevin, who ended up dying alone during COVID. didn't have enough family checking in on him. That is the story of far too many New Yorkers. It is a painful experience, and we can do so much more to lift them up and know that, especially our older citizens, the life that they started, being openly gay in this state when they were younger, could be brutal. It could be an experience where you're rejected by your family. Sometimes you're rejected by your church, your community, and they're the ones that we owe so much more to. So I will continue finding ways to partner with local organizations to bring supportive housing that'll give them wraparound services, housing that'll make them feel valued and loved as they enter the older years of their lives. Also, we just announced construction of $22 million to supporting housing development in central Harlem. And there's no part of our city and our state that does not need housing like this. This is the bold agenda that I'll be pushing forward to make sure that we recognize needs, whether it's fixing problems with legislation or finding ways that we can drive economic development and housing to the people who truly need it. That is my commitment. That is how I can use the role as your governor to help lift up everyone and let them know they're valued, that this is a place where there's no tolerance for hate, that I will stand up against any act of discrimination, and particularly against the trans community, because the murder rate for trans women is appalling, it's shocking, and it has to stop. And that is also my commitment as we work together to make a safer community for everyone. As we come out of this pandemic, we have many challenges, but I look at these challenges as opportunities to lift people up and to do better than we even had before. And that is on all of our shoulders as members of this community, our elected community, our partners, and also everyone, that we have an opportunity to bring back New York City, New York State, and become the envy of the rest of the nation. We value individuals, we value people, and we show love, respect, and dignity to all. It's that simple, and I know we can do this. So thank you for being here today. Thank you to our legislative leaders for making this happen.
Please welcome one of the stars of Pose, Dominique Jackson.
Dominique, thank you for joining and adding the star power to this event. You've been to many events. We did a fabulous Instagram together. We did this during Women's Equality Day because I thought that trans women need to be part of the honoring of women on Equality Day, but also pushing us to do even more. So thank you for your leadership and bringing your star power to this event.
They forgot I was tall. Wow, okay. Thank you, Governor Hochul. I must say that I remember sitting down with you last year for our Instagram Live for women's equality, and that was so important to me because at that point it really meant that there was inclusion. I felt included, I felt a part of New York City, a part of New York State, and I thank you for that. No, we talked about how important it is to live our truths and empower one another to thrive in this world and to be successful. As Lieutenant Governor, you advocated for the passage of numerous bills that were important to transgender, non-binary New Yorkers. I thank you. The ban on conversion therapy based on gender identity or sexual orientation. The ban on the use of gay and transgender panic as a legal defense in courts. The Gender Expression Non-Discrimination Act, GENDA. You presided over the Senate chamber when GENDA finally passed, a watershed moment for TGNC New Yorkers who have fought for its passage for over 15 years. In 2020, you participated in the dedication of the Marsha P. Johnson State Park, the first state park named after a transgender woman of color. You advocated for the bill requiring that all single occupancy public bathrooms be designated as gender neutral, which was ultimately enacted in 2020. We was just trying to pee, y'all. You were a vocal advocate for repealing the Walking While Trans ban, which was enacted in 2021. The legislation repealed portions of a law that led to arbitrary and discriminatory policing of transgender women. I myself have faced that, just for going to the store and having the wrong things in my pocket. You advocated for the passage of the Gender Recognition Act, allowing transgender and non-binary New Yorkers to obtain official documents that reflect the names and pronouns they currently use, a thing that many may not have understood how powerful it is. To walk into a space and not be able to identify as you and have people tell you that you are not who you are is debilitating, diminishing. It takes away your power. Thank you for that. Now, as governor, you are building upon your commitment to supporting the LGBTQ community. In September 2021, you announced the completion of a $30 million affordable housing development in Suffolk County designed for LGBTQ seniors. Something I believe, ladies and gentlemen, we focus on the youth. The youth are needed, but we must focus on that bridge. Build that bridge between the youth and the elders so culture can be passed on, so that we can know from whence we came and understand and know how to make our past to move forward. In November 2021, you announced that construction had begun on a $22 million LGBTQ affirming supportive housing development in Harlem for formerly homeless youth and adults. Today, with the signing of these two bills, you are going even further to protect and empower trans and non-binary New Yorkers. I thank you so very much. Hey, Sean. Sean Coleman, y'all, that's my brother. I just, always, yeah, I love you. Thank you.
Please welcome State Senator Brad Hoylman.
Thank you very much. It's so good to be here. Thank you, Dominique. Those are beautiful words. And thank you, Governor. You know, your grace and humility continue to impress me. Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to be here with you today. I'm so proud to represent this neighborhood in the State Senate. I'm also proud to see 6 incoming LGBTQIA new council members. That is extraordinary. We have so many of them here today. I know they're going to be causing some trouble, some good trouble, but we all welcome that. And it's so good to see my colleagues, Assembly Member Deborah Glick, who is the first openly LGBTQIA member of the New York State Legislature. Assemblymember Dick Gottfried, who I like to refer to as the first fully evolved heterosexual male in the New York State Legislature. And of course, Senator Ramos and Assemblymember Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, whose first bill signing is today. So very proud to be here with you today. There's so much history in this room as we sit here, Governor. Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson gathered here. The AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, ACT UP, was founded in this very room by probably some people here today gathered. And advocates gathered here 40 years ago to plot the passage of the first gay rights bill in the New York City Council. And decades later, the first transgender human rights law, the Gender Expression Non-Discrimination Act, in the New York State Legislature. And 32 years ago this month, in this very room, and before Americans knew who he was from leading our nation's efforts against COVID, a young physician named Tony Fauci met with an understandably combative and frustrated group of activists called the Treatment and Data Group in this room to discuss the lack of government response to skyrocketing rates of PCP pneumonia in AIDS patients. So thank you, Glenda Testone, for safeguarding our history through so many years, for rebuilding this center on time and under budget. We could use you in state government. and for Governor Hochul for being such an important part of our history by choosing this auspicious location. There's been a lot of progress for the LGBTQIA community because of the gatherings in this room. In the last 3 years, as was mentioned, New York State has put through laws like GENDA, the Gender Recognition Act, the repeal of the Walking While Trans ban, the Gay and Trans Panic Defense repeal in our laws, and the conversion therapy ban as well. We've come so far, but as the event today demonstrates, we have still far to go to ensure the safety and the security and protections for transgender and gender non-conforming New Yorkers. According to the National Center for Transgender Equality, 46% of transgender people have reported experiencing verbal harassment. And 2021 has been the deadliest year on record for the transgender community. And on this week of transgender awareness, leading up to Transgender Day of Remembrance, we reaffirm ourselves to the fight for human rights many in our LGBTQIA community are still trying to achieve. Only 12% of transgender New Yorkers have their affirmed name on all of their government-issued IDs, while 63% reported that none of their IDs had their affirmed name and gender. Nobody should suffer the indignity of being dead named or be referred to by their non-affirmed name or gender. Being called a name you don't identify with is invalidating, disrespectful, and could put transgender individuals needlessly in harm's way by potentially outing them to others. That's why I'm so proud to be here today to see our bill signed into law. It requires utility corporations, municipalities, waterworks corporations, and telephone service providers to allow customers to use their preferred name and pronouns. It is common sense. Often, even when somebody goes through and pays for the expensive process of legally changing their name and gender, it's still a years-long and arduous process for them to change their name on utility bills. Every month when their bill arrives in the mail with their dead name, or they try to call the helpline for assistance because they're misgendered, it's just another slight and reminder that they're living in a world that isn't built to affirm their true self. Transphobia kills, no matter how small the microaggression. We can and must do better. This law is a small step, but an important step in the right direction as an example of how New York can continue to be a leader in transgender rights for our nation. Our new law sends an important message of support to the 78,000 plus transgender and gender nonconforming people across New York State. You're seen, you're heard, and you're loved. And again, I'd like to thank my Assembly colleague on the legislation, Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, every advocate who continues to drive our human rights agenda, including Alyssa Crespo, the newish executive director of the New Pride Agenda, and Richard Berkeley, the executive director of the Public Utility Law Project. Of course, Majority Leader Stuart Cousins for her unwavering support of the LGBTQIA and labor communities, and Governor Hochul for your leadership. Thank you so much.
Please welcome Assemblymember Jessica Gonzalez Rojas.
After following Senator Hoylman, I have to put the speaker down here. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you all for being here today during Trans Awareness Week to witness the signing of these two very, very important bills. During my first year in office, it's been a very long 10.5 months, it has become more and more clear to me that New Yorkers are incredibly strong and resilient. We are survivors. And today we are standing with survivors of harm and of systems that has not always served them as best as they could. As the chair of the Assembly's Subcommittee on Human Trafficking, it is incredibly meaningful to know that legislation by my state senator, Jessica Ramos, and my colleague, Assemblymember Gottfried, that provides protections to victims of labor and sex trafficking will be signed into law today, I am also so deeply grateful to Governor Hochul for signing my law and my bill with Senator Brad Hoylman, which will move utility corporations to ensure that their systems are reflective of their customer's name and pronouns, and that they utilize that in both verbal and written communication. As mentioned, this is common sense, but it actually has real implications on people's lives. And as an advocate and as an activist always, I want to bring a voice into the room. I want to share the story of an advocate who brought this issue and this bill forward to us. So I want to bring Sam into this room. Sam informed us that they legally changed their name on December 12, 2018. They have been going by Sam for nearly a year prior to the court change and were unable to pay the filing fee to legally change it. There was no way for them to use anything else aside from their legal name with utility companies. But after their legal name change, they attempted to change their name with their service providers through their website. The internet provider did not change their name on the account until August 2020, nearly 2 years later, and only after they filed a discrimination claim with the Department of Public Service. These are the barriers that they're facing. This effectively outed them to their landlord and several of their neighbors in an apartment where they were staying in, and led to their neighbors harassing them about their transgender identity. Sam tried multiple times to change their name with the internet provider and even went to their office in person, but with no luck. On top of the harassment they were facing as a result of this, it was embarrassing to outwardly be outed every time they needed to speak to their internet provider. When they moved to Buffalo in December of 2019, they did not have any identification with the name on it given to them at birth, as mentioned, also known as their dead name, and struggled to get the company to transfer their service. No one should have to go through this emotional labor or administrative burden when accessing services in our state. No person should have to fear their dead name being used or that they will be misgendered when they're accessing basic services that many of us use on a daily basis. No one. The reality is that while we continue to lift barriers for people who are trans to change their identity documents, many still have not been able to do so. We must ensure that as trans folks undergo the process to change their documents, if they choose, that they are respected with every institution that they do business with and interact with in the state. This is perhaps the most crucial at a time when we're seeing record numbers of the murders of trans people, particularly trans women, and when we're seeing record numbers of anti-LGBT legislation introduced and passed across the nation. But where they fail, New York must lead. So yes, let's give a round of applause to that. So I really want to thank my colleagues who supported these pieces of legislation. It really takes a village. And again, thank you, Governor, for signing them into law today and for your years of allyship to the LGBT community. I want to give a shout out to her staff, Matt McMorrow, Chatat Floyd, Amit Baga, and all their hard work. It takes a lot to get this done. Most importantly, I want to thank the advocates. They continue to push New York to be a state where we move from awareness to action and to help those who have survived to move forward and thrive. Thank you to Richard Berkeley and Sam Fodusky at the Public Utility Law Project of New York, to Elisa Crespo, my hermana, at New Pride Agenda, Amanda Badin at Equality New York, Julie Gray Owens at the Gender Equality of New York, and to the many advocates who supported this legislation. And as the governor mentioned, we're not done yet. We will continue to push for more trans-affirming policies that last beyond a week, beyond a month, beyond a year, but last a lifetime. Because it matters, because you matter, because trans lives matter. Thank you so much.
Please welcome State Senator Jessica Ramos.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm so proud to be here as the other half of the Jessicas of Jackson Heights. It's true. Growing up in the most diverse place on earth gave me a unique lens of inclusion that I've wanted to make the envy of the world my entire life. We so often say Queens is the future to express the multi-ethnic, intergenerational present we live in Queens, and that's coming to the rest of the world in just a matter of time. Those are the values I've wanted to manifest in my legislation. And that meant that I needed to walk into that state Senate with a strong and unapologetic LGBTQIA agenda. The START Act was one of the first bills I introduced in my first legislative session back in 2019. And after so many tough conversations, I'm here to thank Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins and Governor Kathy Hochul for seeing my neighbors and reaffirming their right not only to exist, but to thrive. Many of my neighbors are victims of human trafficking and are arrested and charged for sex work, forgery, theft, all other violent crimes, and creating a record that will follow them really for the rest of their lives until today. It's also a condition that dissuades them from cooperating with authorities to report their captors. My neighbors, especially my immigrant neighbors, risk further exploitation when they have a criminal record as a result of human trafficking because they can be deported and returned to the very same dangerous conditions that led to their kidnapping in their first place. There's a woman who was deemed a trafficking victim and had all her sex work convictions vacated, but was unable to vacate her petty theft cases because of the limitations of the law. As a result, she is unable to renew her green card because she fears that doing so will trigger removal proceedings as a result of these convictions, and she's unable to move on with her life. Another person had all convictions but one theft conviction vacated. Their criminal record prevents them from getting a job. A 16-year-old trafficker shot and killed someone in front of them. After the traffickers forced them to hide the weapon, they were charged with hindering prosecution, and that hindered them really getting to grow up. The longer a person has a criminal record, the longer they remain vulnerable to exploitation and limited access to employment, housing, and other basic needs. Vacating their records means opening up the opportunity for victims of trafficking to follow their dreams and find any job they wish without their past following them. The START Act will give victims of trafficking the fresh start they need in their lives. But that's not the only reason it's called the START Act. The bill is also the start of decriminalizing sex work in New York State. Putting us on a path to a system that can distinguish between coerced sex work and consensual acts between adults. The Coalition Decrim New York worked with me on this bill, and we will not rest until every human being has complete autonomy over their bodies. I want to thank my legislative partner, Dick Gottfried. I want to, above all, though, thank all of the advocates that helped us cross the finish line here. The Legal Aid Society, Make the Road, Jared Trujillo, T.S. Candy, Brian Romero, and so many others who lobbied my colleagues, had really tough conversations with some really stubborn people. But we got here. We were able to have those conversations, and sometimes that's all that it takes. Having those tough conversations with people and helping them see the humanity in others. I also want to thank one other person who's in the room who's taught me so much that I know and who I will miss in elected office, and that's Councilmember Jimmy Van Bramer. Thank you so much for being a role model always. Thank you.
Please welcome Assemblymember Richard Gottfried.
Well, good morning. So my name isn't Jessica, but but I spent almost all of my first 18 years as a resident of Queens before bringing my Flushing values to Manhattan. You know, about 11 years ago, we got a law passed in New York that I was delighted to sponsor that said that a trafficking victim who had been forced into sex work could get that conviction vacated. And we were, as far as I know, the first in the country to enact such a law. And that was exciting. But a few years later, some of the advocates who had brought that concept to me and had worked with me to get it enacted came with some mixed news. The good news was that about 19 states had followed New York in enacting similar legislation, which was really nice to hear. That what we did was having an effect all across the country. But what was the other part of the message was that most of those states had gone well beyond what New York had done and had enacted laws that applied the vacating principle for trafficking victims, in many cases regardless of the offense that they were convicted of. And to a certain extent, it's up to a judge's discretion. But the concept was there in the law in a whole lot of states that had really taken the concept we enacted in New York and greatly expanded it. And so we started working on the bill that Governor Hochul will be signing in a few minutes. And yeah, it took a lot of doing because a lot of people looked at it and said, oh my goodness, you mean like if they killed somebody? And, you know, we said, well, you know, first of all, if it's really the product of coercion and of being sex trafficked, then yeah, maybe even in a case like that, it's appropriate. But we also pointed out that under the bill, it's up to the discretion of the judge. But it puts the concept into the law. And I'm just very delighted that, as Governor Hochul said, I'm developing a collection of New York State pens. Although I'll be interested in seeing whether you've gotten the governor's name on the pens, because you know previously it's these pens they have the name of the governor. So far, I've only seen pens that just have the state seal. So the question is, has Governor Hochul gotten her name onto the pens yet? So I'll be interested in seeing that. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to all of the many groups that helped make this bill law. And above all, thank you to Governor Hochul for signing it. Thank you.
And please welcome the Executive Director of New Pride Agenda, Elisa Crespo.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I just want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer. So as the speaker announced, I'm not sure where that person's hiding, but my name is Elisa Crespo. I'm the Executive Director of the New Pride Agenda, a new statewide LGBTQ education and advocacy organization. And I first want to start by saying thank you to Glenda and to the center for having us here today. I have very fond memories coming here as a teenager, dancing at dance parties to Donna Summer's Last Dance. And this is a historic place nonetheless. Today, two very important bills will be signed into law. One that will provide relief and a fresh start for a community of people who never should have been arrested or convicted in the first place, survivors of labor and sex trafficking. Allowing survivors to restart their lives will undoubtedly remove barriers to housing, immigration, and employment. And although I don't know what it feels like to be a survivor of trafficking, I know that so many people in the state of New York and across the nation do know what it feels like to be a survivor of trafficking. And they have been waiting for this day for a long time. So today we acknowledge them. Moreover, today New York sends a strong message to utility corporations, municipalities, waterworks corporations, and telephone companies that they must address their customers accordingly and respect their identities, full stop. It is a small but important gesture of respect that goes a very long way in the lives of trans and gender nonconforming people. I'd be remiss if I didn't use my time up here to thank all of the advocates and organizations who pushed for these bills. It is their tireless efforts that got us here. This is your victory and no one else's. With respect to the utilities bill, I'd like to acknowledge some folks that were already acknowledged, but why not do it again? Richard Berkeley, the Executive Director of the Public Utility Law Project of New York. Sam Fedusky, who's the Senior Staff Attorney of Western New York at the Public Utility Law Project. Amanda Babine, of the Executive Director of Equality New York. Julie Gray Owens of Gender Equality New York. Trayvon Mayers, the Senior Director in Advocacy and Community Engagement here at the center. And as I look out in the audience, I see so many people who do the work every day, who are here advancing social justice. People like Jared Trujillo, T.S. Candy, Sean Coleman, Melissa Sklars, Brian Ellicott, so many of you who are here. And if I forgot you, I apologize. Is that Joe Presley back there? Hi, Joey. So as we head towards Trans Day of Remembrance on Saturday, I ask you to dig deep inside of yourself and ask yourself, what have you done to protect and better the lives of trans people? What have you really done to be a better ally in every sense of the word, which, by the way, is an adjective. It means action. Remember that Trans Week of Awareness is about resilience. It is about solidarity. It is about organizing and moving forward while honoring the lives of those that we have lost. It is not about tokenizing trans people and asking them to deliver remarks. That is not solidarity. To that end, we must not rest on our laurels. How can we when the world has reminded us that 2021 is the deadliest year on record for trans people, when the unemployment and poverty rate for trans people are sky high, when nearly half of all transgender women of color will experience incarceration at some point in their life? So I ask everyone in this room to recommit yourself to trans liberation and to unapologetically fight alongside us, even when it may not be politically expedient for you to do so. Again, thank you. It is so great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Let's keep fighting. Let's make New York the best state in the union for trans people. Let's uplift the economic status of trans people. Let's hire trans people. Let's make the entire country jealous by continuing to pass legislation and implement policies that will improve the quality of life of those who need it the most. And remember, it is time to move beyond equality and towards equity. Pa'lante.
We will now sign the bills.
It has my name on it.
Oh, it does.
A real collector.
Please remain seated for the duration of the bill signing.
Is everybody here? All their electeds?
Hey, we are all the
Hi, Gail.
check out all the Queens girls.
Okay. It never looks quite that neat when I do it this way. almost all of them. All right. It's signed. Let's showcase this. There we go, everybody.